Korean War, we experienced so much hardship while fleeing. I remember patrolling the ceasefire line during my mandatory military service. I felt so free after my shift was over. The last remnant of the Cold War era, a patch of peace with armory on both sides, where no one can enter without approval for access, but nevertheless where flowers blossom and bear fruit. As of 2020, 6,373 species have been confirmed to exist within the DMZ, including 102 endangered species, possessing great environmental value. Biodiversity within the DMZ is notable for its self-healing and restoration properties. Biodiversity sets the agenda for a sustainable economic ecosystem for the coexistence of the two Koreas divided by ideology, solutions for social conflicts to create a better future for our youth, and international solidarity to respond to climate crisis. I hope we no longer have to suffer from ideological conflicts and wars. I hope peace lasts for a very long time. I hope we can create a society where we respect each other's differences and move forward together. I often feel a socio-economic gap that I cannot overcome. I hope there are more ladders for opportunities available. I always thought floods and pandemics would not be a part of my life, but it's scary to experience these disasters quite often. I look forward to the day I can smile and take a deep breath of fresh air without my mask. Self-healing and recovery created the DMZ's diversity. Let's begin our search for a new beginning for peace. Proposed by the DMZ for peace and coexistence, future generations, climate change, and youth issues. Green Détente Sprouting in DMZ Forum 2022.
Thank you very much. The beginning for greater peace. We are hosting this event at Gyeonggi-do for greater peace, and I would like to thank everyone participating in this event. I am the MC of the opening ceremony of this forum. My name is Kim Gyeongmi. We are still under the COVID-19 situation, and that is why we have not been able to invite many people to this venue. But through the official YouTube channel of Gyeonggi-do, many people are joining us for this opening ceremony, and I thank you. We will be looking back at the meaning of peace during this DMZ Forum, and we ask for the great interest and support of the people of Gyeonggi-do and Korea. To commence the opening of the DMZ Forum, we have a special performance. There will be a performance of a meaningful song, which is titled The Song of the Birds. This song was played by Pablo Casals, a world-renowned cellist of the 20th century who fled to the United States in protest against the Franco dictatorship of Spain after receiving the UN Peace Prize in 1971. He performed this song, which thereafter became a symbol of peace around the world. This is a folk song of Catalina. And after watching Pablo Casals' UN Peace Prize acceptance speech, we will watch the performance, which will be performed by cellist Kim Min-ju, who is a member of Korea's one and only Orchestra of People with Disabilities, the Hanbit Performing Arts Group. Please greet her with a big round of applause.
Of the birds. The birds in the space, sing peace, peace, peace. And the music is a music that Bach and Beethoven and all the greats would have loved and admired. It is so beautiful, and it is also the soul of my country, Catalonia.
네. 오늘 아름답고 감동적인 선율이었습니다. 김민주 첼리스트에게 여러분 다시
Once again, a big hand for cellist Kim Min-ju. The birds in the sky are singing peace, 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 said Pablo Casals. And his love for his country and his yearning for peace seems to be rekindled here at the DMZ Forum 2022 after half a century. It was even more meaningful to see the two performing together as the video of Pablo Casal's performance was shown on screen. And the cellists have the cello within his or her, next to his or her heart. And so the cello is known to be an instrument that is closest to the human heart. This brings us to think once again about the meaning and the significance of peace, which leads us to the keynote discussion. And the theme of the discussion is the vision and inspiration from the DMZ for Greater Peace. I would like to invite the two co-chairmen of the Let's DMZ Organizing Committee, Governor Kim Dong-yeon and Professor Choi Jae-chun. The theme of 2022 Let's DMZ Gyeonggi, the official slogan is Greater Peace. What does Greater Peace mean? The two gentlemen will answer this question, and I would like to invite them up on stage. Also, we have a visual graphic facilitator who will help us better understand the contents of the discussion through the graphics. And we will once again be able to look through the discussion contents by looking at the records. We have the two gentlemen up on stage. Let's hand over the microphone to the two gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am co-chairman of Let's DMZ Organizing Committee. I am governor of Gyeonggi-do. My name is Kim Dong-yeon. Yes, I am teaching at Ewha University. My name is Choi Jae-chun. I'm also the president of the Biodiversity Foundation.
Concerning the DMZ, I have always had great interest for decades, and I have researched the DMZ for a very long time. Thank you for this opportunity. Well, we have the theme Green Détente, and our MC is dressed in green as well. Well, a big round of applause for our MC, please. It's a great pleasure to meet you today. Gyeonggi Province has this program titled Let's DMZ to discuss peace and the environment. We have given this theme a great number of thoughts, and we would like to try and think out of the box. And so we don't want it to be just a formality, but we look forward to this event having tangible results for peace. And we are going through difficulties, but we hope to be able to take a look at how to create peace and sustainability in our everyday lives. We want to become a model on this agenda compared to other municipalities, compared to even the central government. We hope that Gyeonggi Province will play a leading role. Professor Choi Jae-chun has joined us as the co-chair. It's a great honor. I myself have always respected Professor Choi, and I always have great learning opportunities whenever I meet him and discuss the themes of peace and sustainability as well as biodiversity. But overall, I learned from him about life and our society. And so it's a great honor to invite him to join us as the co-chair. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Well, Professor Choi mentioned that he has been interested in the DMZ for a very long time, and he has researched the DMZ. So could you talk to us about the value of DMZ? Well, the value of DMZ was well described through the opening video. This is something that the whole world is taking note of, the whole world recognizes the value of the biodiversity found in the DMZ. For 7 decades, DMZ has not had been given access to people, and so that actually enabled it to maintain its biodiversity. I've spent my whole life observing and researching nature, and I have been able to come to a conclusion at this age. Nature, if left alone, continues to diversify itself. And this is something that we are already experiencing. During COVID-19, we had the variations alpha and then beta and then delta and omicron, and we continue to see variations of the coronavirus. So nature doesn't stand still. It continues to diversify. People need to live in this nature, but we move in the direction of reducing diversity. That really is quite contradictory. The DMZ has been prohibited from, and it has been an area that people could not enter. And many people outside of Korea find this quite amazing. And there are 2 things that I observe. The DMZ is called demilitarized zone, but it is actually the most heavily militarized zone on Earth. So it's heavily militarized on either side, and Seoul is just very close to the DMZ. But people from outside of Korea find it very amazing that we are living so peacefully in Seoul, although we're very close to the DMZ. And concerning the value of DMZ, people outside of Korea are amazed that Koreans don't realize the value of DMZ when the value of DMZ is currently in the limelight. There is no such area so well preserved in this region. My professor from Harvard, Dr. Edward Will, whenever I meet him, he doesn't say, "How have you been doing?" But whenever I open the door, he would right off says, "How is the DMZ?" He would always ask me, "How is the DMZ?" And I would always say, "Why don't you ever ask me how I'm doing?" So that's how interested he was in DMZ. I'm actually called Jay in English, and he would always say, "Jay, think about it. There will be a time when we will be able to access the DMZ and dream of the day that we can go there and research the DMZ. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that exciting?" So the whole world is waiting for that. But it seems that in Korea, we are not that interested in the DMZ. We know it's there, but we don't realize and recognize the value of DMZ. But, Governor, you talked about the slogan, Greater Peace. Thank you for this theme. I also look forward to greater peace. What do you mean by greater peace? Well, peace usually means safety from war or the reduction of tension. But rather than thinking of peace just being free from war or tension, that's actually the narrow definition of peace. But if we widen that definition, I think we can include international and society, the future of youth and sustainability. All areas can be included. We went through the pandemic and we were able to realize once again that there are many threats ahead of us in the future, such as future pandemics, the climate crisis, or the demographic crisis due to the low birth rate. All of these issues need to be solved in order to have true peace. And so we shouldn't be thinking about peace in the narrow scope of just between the 2 Koreas or being free from war, but we need to have peace between generations, with nature, being free from pandemic, and also finding solutions for common challenges such as the climate crisis. And so international cooperation can even be included under this big theme of greater peace. I would like to add to that as well. In 2014, I believe, at that time, there was the DMZ Forum, and there was a German journalist who was invited. He actually majored in biology in college, Caroline, I believe her name was. And what she mentioned at the 2014 DMZ Forum is something that I always remember. She said the unification of Germany actually happened overnight, like a dream. They did make efforts for unification, but all of a sudden one day, it wasn't just a political decision, but what she said was that culture, art, environment, sports, and other soft issues. It wasn't about politically trying to achieve peace, but these soft elements came together, and all of a sudden, unification just happened. And so she mentioned that the two Koreas should start with environmental issues. That was her suggestion. And I think she was right on the point. I have always researched the DMZ, and so I have worked with the Ministry of Unification. And last year, I actually published a book. And in that process, I learned that peace is a great concept, but both sides feel very uncomfortable talking about peace. When we say, let's achieve peace, both sides are reluctant to budge and they don't want to talk about how to achieve peace. I found that quite strange, but Gyeonggi Province has decided on this theme, Greater Peace, and I feel that this theme is much more inclusive, and it's actually trying to view the DMZ from another angle. So I have great expectations for this forum. Professor, I think you have given us great food for thought. As you mentioned, if we try to achieve peace through politics, that's quite difficult to achieve. But if we think about food, culture, our everyday lives, and if we think about all aspects of our lives together, I think we can one day achieve peace. In the long run, unification cannot happen politically. Just like you mentioned about the German example, we need to build various soft issues up to achieve peace one day. So Gyeonggi Province wishes to approach this issue in this direction. Today's theme is the DMZ. And so how are we going to maintain nature within the DMZ and respond to environmental challenges? So that will be the priority for Gyeonggi Province. But as you have mentioned, Professor, we also need to think about the surrounding issues. We have to have the infrastructure in place. As we have seen in the opening video, we need to provide more opportunities for more people, and that's what Gyeonggi Province will try to do. Try to solve issues of employment, of dignity as humans, and the livelihood of our citizens, and more opportunities for the youth, so that we can have an inclusive community for coexistence. I think creating that kind of community in the end is also connected to peace and the environment. If I may add to this, in the northern part of Gyeonggi Province, there are 10 districts with about 3.6 million people living there. We have 14 million people, and so about 4 million are living on the northern part. And the northern part of Gyeonggi Province has always been faced with restrictions environmentally in terms of their infrastructure because it's so close to North Korea. And there were also military restrictions. And so it was very difficult for the northern part of our province to develop. You mentioned that for 70 years, people were not able to enter the DMZ. And so the northern part of our province has been limited from development, but at the same time, their nature is well preserved. If you go to the area of Yeoncheon or Pocheon on the northern part of our province, it's very well preserved. I have been working with within the economy sector for a long time. And I believe that Gyeonggi Province can become the heart of our economy in the future. And so I will do my best to develop our province, and I also will work on creating an administrative body for the northern part of our province so that we can utilize the well-preserved nature along with the talent that is available for growth. Growth does not necessarily mean quantitative growth, but qualitative growth that is sustainable. And so that is my vision for the northern part of our province. I think that is a way to expand the concept of DMZ to our province. That is actually the priority that I have.
Yes. And today, after this keynote discussion, there will be other following sessions during this forum. And I did mention this before, but when it comes to the environment or music or the arts or sports, there are many different soft areas that we can tackle and work on in order to become one step closer to unification. And on top of that, the governor just mentioned the economic sector. And in some sense, I think that we are in a situation where if the economy is not doing well, then all of these soft areas cannot do well as well. So I think that these all have to go hand in hand. But this is not something easy to do. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to say this, but in 2014, at that time, I engaged in an act that goes against the interest of Korea. At that time, there was a Congress of Biodiversity which took place in Pyeongchang. And at that time, I was invited as a chairman of the Congress. And at that time, what I did was I said that DMZ is no longer the land of Korea. I said that the DMZ is a land of humanity. And at that time, I also said that if the Tanzanian government tries to develop Serengeti as an apartment complex, then what would be the reaction of the people around the world? Will they say that, oh, it's up to Tanzania to make such a decision because it's their land? No, that is not the reaction, because people around the world will say, then what will happen to the animals there? And there will be fundraising and there will be many different activities to stop that. What about the Amazon and Galapagos? I think that DMZ is at the level of global recognition. It stands shoulder to shoulder to the areas, these renowned places that I just mentioned. So if we do not preserve the DMZ, then the world will not respect Korea. So the issue of DMZ is no longer an issue for Korea alone. It's not just an issue of domestic land development for Korea alone. DMZ is a place, it's a very valuable land where the global community must preserve together. So we are in a difficult position. The local citizens living nearby the DMZ, of course, they want their land, the area that they live in, to be developed. But at the same time, we also have to think about how we can preserve the land and also generate economic gains. So this is not an easy challenge. Yes, I do agree with what you've just said, Professor. And I would like to reinterpret this from my perspective. Now, in Korea, there are many different subcategories within our society. There is the economic sector, there is education, there's culture and art. There are these many different sectors. Are they all in existence alone, separately? Well, while I engage in economic activities, and I also served as a vice prime minister of economy, I had to deal with the economy and also many different sectors as well. But I thought about these different sectors, and I thought about if they can exist separately alone. You talked about Tanzania and also the DMZ. If we were to build a factory or an apartment complex in the middle of the DMZ, then if we think of it from a long-term perspective, from an economic terminology, would this mean the promotion of efficiency? I do not think so. But if we take on a short-term perspective, well, if we do a cost-benefit analysis, yes, it might make sense. But from a long-term perspective, no, the development of DMZ from an industrial perspective does not make sense. Because the owners of corporations, well, might want different goals compared to the consumers or compared to the employees of corporations. The employees, how can I say this? The employees want to continue to work at the company. And they want to work in a stable workplace for a long time. And when they engage in business activities, they probably have a long-term perspective. When we engage in activities, we also have to have a long-term perspective. And we have to think of sustainability. And we also have to think about sustainable qualitative growth. So it's not just about cost-benefits analysis. We have to think about a different way of assessing the performance and the outcomes of our activities and actions. So Gyeonggi Province, Gyeonggi-do, when it comes to economic issues and when it comes to development and growth, we will place sustainable goals at the forefront. But there's one thing also that we have to think about. If we draw a big picture for Gyeonggi Province and the global community, well, the issues at hand might seem different compared to the micro issues from the perspective of the local residents, because there are inconveniences that are suffered by the people living near the DMZ. I do understand. So we also have to think about how we can solve these inconveniences. And these issues are related to values. The communities, they deserve sustainable qualitative growth and development, but in that process, we need to have a good understanding among the stakeholders. So, Gyeonggi Province up till now have worked long and hard on development issues, for example, transportation and the development of housing. But we will take a more comprehensive perspective when we pursue development. Yes, and personally, I am curious what kind of symbolic meaning the pursuit of development and preservation may have. So I've been attending to a lot of forums or conferences related to environment. And every time I go to a conference, people tend to say that it's remarkable how Korea has succeeded during a very short period of time, have succeeded in reforestation or afforestation. And so Korea has been noted from around the world as a country that has been very successful in that area. Because you may recall that when we were young, when we were asked to draw the mountains of Korea, we drew red mountains and dark brown mountains because there were no trees in our mountains. But now we have green mountains throughout the country. So as an ecologist, I am very proud of what we have achieved. However, still, we have room for improvement because back then, when we pursued afforestation, we did not have a lot of knowledge when it comes to the ecosystem. So we only planted just a number of different species or types of trees. So if you look at the forests that we have in Korea, you can see that, yes, the color is beautiful. We have beautiful green forests, but the forests are not that healthy. We have to continue to be able to well manage the forests. And when we think about unification, which will eventually take place on the Korean Peninsula, we also will have to engage in reforestation efforts in North Korea. at that time, we should not try to buy the seeds and the seedlings of the trees from overseas. I think that we have to have a very professional approach towards reforestation. We have to have a good, solid plan, and we have to think about the species that will fit the environment of North Korea and the DMZ. So we have to take on a very smart approach when it comes to reforestation of North Korea following unification. But if there is sudden unification and we are not prepared, then of course we will just try to import the seeds. And so I believe that DMZ should be a place for a tree nursery where we can actually foster the species of trees that are appropriate for our land, for the Korean Peninsula and North Korea. We should prepare ourselves. And this really makes my heart beat and excited just by thinking of this. Chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea, I understand, is very interested in afforestation. So, having said that, I believe that rather than building a factory in the DMZ, I think that preparing for afforestation would be good for us. It can also generate profits in the long run. So I think that when we plan ahead for the DMZ, this might be one area that we should think of. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that comment. And Dr. Choi, he served as a president of the National Ecology Center, and I worked with him back then as well, because I, at that time, was in charge of the national budget. So I had a chance to talk with him back then. And thank you very much. I totally agree with what you just said. Within the DMZ, implementing such plans would be a good idea, but not just only the DMZ. I think that in northern part of Gyeonggi Province, like I said, well, we are developing plans to further develop the area, the northern part of Gyeonggi Province. So if you think that there are any provinces or cities in the northern part of Gyeonggi-do which you think would be appropriate for such a project, then please let me know. I will actively reflect your views. People might have different perspectives, and I think, however, in general, people think that North Korea and South Korea relations will become more stringent or difficult under this current administration. But if you think about it, Gyeonggi Province, there's about 1/4 of the Korean population living in Gyeonggi Province. And also the economy, the industry, the education, and the military, all of the core components of these areas of Korea are located here in Gyeonggi-do. And also not only afforestation, but different areas regarding inter-Korean relations can be promoted here in Korea and under the current administration if of course, there are concerns that inter-Korean relations will become difficult under the current administration, but Gyeonggi Province will do its utmost to find a way to promote the relations and ties. Yes. So today at this forum, ESG will be discussed as an important topic, and I'm thankful for that because when it comes to the environment, basically, there are 4 stages that we have to go through. First, there's the international community. There are agreements that are reached within the international community. And after that, at the country level, there has to be leadership. And then there has to be the citizens taking action. But between the nation and the citizens, there are the businesses that play a role. It could be the public sector or the private sector. But the businesses play an important role too. When it comes to issues such as biodiversity or the issue of climate change, many international organizations and many countries are coming together to make meaningful progress. But it's not difficult. As you know, the Korean government has laid out a 2050 carbon neutrality plan. This is not an easy goal, but the Korean government has declared that it will meet this goal, reach this goal by 2050. And so I have great expectations. I never thought that I would say this, but I have great expectations that the businesses will also play their role. I work at a university, and everything is very slow at universities, but businesses are very fast. If the businesses do not transform themselves, they cannot survive in the market. That is why the businesses are just remarkable organizations that can achieve so much. But now the businesses are focusing on ESG, and I think that this is really indeed remarkable. There are businesses who have asked me for consulting services for greenwashing. They want to kind of avoid the ESG principles, find a way out, and kind of hide that. But anyhow, nevertheless, there are a lot of businesses who are very serious about ESG management. And I do believe that our society will fastly change if the businesses really practice their will and their commitment to implement their ESG principles. So Gyeonggi Province, along with the people of Gyeonggi Province, if they join hands together and join hands with the people of Korea, then I do believe that we can bring about great change in our society.
I saw in the news today that Samsung has joined RE100. So, Professor, as you have mentioned, companies, if they don't change, then it's very difficult to survive in the future. And so it really is a survival for strategy survival. And so it really is a strategy for survival because they won't become sustainable in the future. So they need to create value, deliver value, and sell value. And so it seems that the companies are leading the way. For the next session, we will have speakers talking about ESG on the part of the private sector. And so we look very much forward to that session. If I may talk about myself, I have worked with companies, I have worked within the government, and concerning some of the policies related to environment, low birth rates, I'm not sure if we actually found true solutions. I'm not really sure if we were truly committed. I always try to look back on what I have done thus far. So whether it be RE100, we talk about net zero and the environment. But in order for all of this to be tangible, we need strong commitment. And we also need to change the everyday lives of Koreans. And so I always try to reflect upon this fact. And so I will start achieving this here at Gyeonggi Province. I hope that the citizens of Gyeonggi Province can work together, and I believe that the change in awareness is the most important. And so I would like to start with myself and my province to set the direction for our citizens. And quite fortunately, I have worked within the central government for a very long time, and I have always talked about the big picture. But concerning the change of the everyday lives of the citizens, I think I have been quite abstract and not so tangible. But since I am here at Gyeonggi Province, I am able to work closer with the 14 million citizens, and I start to feel that it's possible to change everyday lives. We will start small, but we will surely be practical in our approach. In particular, within Gyeonggi Province, we have large companies, we have mid-sized companies, we have smaller companies, so we will work together with the private sector within our province. I think our time is almost up, but I would like to mention our generation, I think, has been the generation that were the biggest wrongdoers for nature and future generations. And so I think we need to reflect upon that. And we also need to make sure that we put our words into action. That is certainly what I will be working on at Gyeonggi Province. Maybe I can turn the floor to Professor Choi for his closing remarks. Well, I don't know if I am the person to give you the closing remarks, but given the dialogue that we have had thus far, if I may try to wrap that up, we need to set a goal. And in order to achieve that goal, we start to run towards that goal, but sometimes we miss things on the way. But since we are working under the slogan of greater peace, it's not just about unification. We need to also take a look at the environment, the economy, and other areas that are related to greater peace. And in order to do that, what do we need to do? Maybe we should start with the soft elements. That's why music is important, art is important, and sports are important. We also need to have participatory activities. Well, as long as I'm the co-chair, I will do my best as well. Thank you very much, Professor. Let's DMZ has three main parts. We have this academic forum, we have an artistic element, and we have a sports element as well. So we are working with the soft elements as well. One thing that I would like to note is that we also have a project to walk along the DMZ. I believe that it's October 29th. You're not able to enter the DMZ normally, but we can actually enter parts of the DMZ through this program. And so I always invite ambassadors here in Korea, and they're always very pleased to be invited. So I hope that you will join us on October 29th to walk along and inside the DMZ so that we can walk together and we can think about the DMZ together. I hope you will join us for our walk. This brings us to the end of our talk. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you look back to the screen? Now, as I mentioned before, we have a facilitator who have drew the images to help us better understand what was discussed. You can see the main keywords on the screen. So, what do you think? Are there anything missing here up on the screen? No, I think that this is great. It includes everything that we mentioned, the important keywords, and also the important topics are included here. And I think that we have to really work on the small things, the small steps, and work on the low-hanging fruits. And as we accumulate these achievements, then we can actually go towards greater achievements. And Gyeonggi Province will lead the way. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Choi? Yes, it looks great. It looks fabulous. I like it. Yes, thank you very much. So I would like to ask the two gentlemen to come down from the stage because we want you to actually sign this document, this graphic image of the discussion that took place. And next, as you know, let's DMZ, the beginning of greater peace. The key word is written here, and it was mentioned that we have to focus on the soft issues as well. And the drawing here really summarizes what was discussed between the two gentlemen, and the two are signing this graphic record. And I think the caricatures are also a very accurate description of the two gentlemen. We continue to talk about peace during the DMZ Forum. This year we are talking about greater peace. So once again, everyone, a big round of applause for Dr. Choi and Governor Kim. This concludes the keynote discussion. Governor Kim Dong-yeon of Gyeonggi-do and also Professor Choi Jae-chun, the two co-chairs of the organizing committee of Let's DMZ, took part in the keynote discussion. here at the DMZ Forum 2022. After we rearrange the stage, we will host the keynote session, and the session is on building peace together, corporate accountability and vision in the ESG era. Before we begin the keynote session, I would like to invite the moderator of the session up on stage. Once again, Professor Choi Jae-chun, Professor Choi will serve as a moderator and talk with the representatives of the invited businesses who will talk about the ESG efforts that are made by the businesses. The moderator once again is Professor Choi Jae-chun, and we have a number of speakers invited to discuss the role of businesses in terms of ESG management.
네, 이제 바로 기조 세션이 시작되겠습니다. 여러분 모두 착석을
Now begin
해주시고요.
the keynote session. I would like to ask everyone to please take your seats. Please take your seats so we may begin the session. Thank you for your cooperation.
자, 이제 좌장님을 비롯한
We would now like to invite the moderator along with the speakers on stage. Please join us on stage. We will be discussing building peace together, corporate accountability and vision in the ESG era. Let us gather for the next session. This session will be moderated by Professor Choi Jae-chun. We look forward to your support and interest. We also have many people joining us online through our YouTube channel. Thank you very much for your participation. So we are talking about peace. For this session, we will be talking about the private sector. We have invited all of the speakers on stage, and so I would now like to turn the floor to Professor Choi Jae-chun.
Yes, I am the moderator of this session, Choi Jae-chun. And if you have joined us from the beginning, then you probably heard the discussion that was carried out by me and also Governor Kim Dong-yeon. And probably then you would have a good understanding about how this forum is to proceed. We are faced with a difficult challenge, a difficult task. Up till now, we had thought that environmental preservation actually is pitted against economic development. However, global investment companies have declared that they will look for companies that are practicing ESG management. And now, increasingly, we are thinking that perhaps the two can go hand in hand. And increasingly here in Korea as well, a lot of companies, beyond my expectation, are seriously taking on this challenge of implementing ESG principles. The businesses, which are one of the most remarkable organizations in our society, have declared that they will now take action, which leads me to be very hopeful for what lies ahead in the future. So during this session, first of all, we have invited the National Pension Service Investment Management's head of Global Responsible Investment and Governance Division, Mr. Lee Dong-seop, and he will talk about what is being carried out at NSP.
Pleased to meet you. Thank you for this great opportunity. As have been introduced, I am the head of Global Responsible Investment and Governance Division. My name is Lee Dong-seop at the National Pension Service. The National Pension Service. Why were we invited to this forum? I think that's where I need to start my presentation. And I would also like to introduce to you what we do at the National Pension Service, and related to responsible investment and ESG, how is it incorporated into our investment management? So I would like to speak in the following order: the investment management at National Pension Service, as well as the major activities focusing on what we look for in companies that we invest. And also, I would like to mention some future plans. The National Pension Service is one of the top 3 global pension funds. As of last year, we have operated a fund worth 949 trillion won. This fund is used to pay the pension to the people who have joined our pension service. And so we have a liability reserve. We have about 300 people actually operating this fund of over 900 trillion won. The National Pension Service is a long-term investment, and so we focus on long-term and stable profitability. So, if this is our direction for investment, why are we focusing on responsible investment and ESG? Responsible investment, it means that we are considering ESG in our investment, and we believe that that is beneficial for the long-term sustainability of our profitability. And not only are we having these slogans, but in order to make actual responsible investments, we have constraints in place, and we also have organizations to put our principles into action. And we also make sure that we target companies. So what we invest in are companies through bonds and equity. And so we also monitor the activities of the companies that we invest in. And we also participate in BOD meetings for communication and also to contribute to decision making. So, in the end, we believe that ESG and other non-financial aspects can contribute to long-term sustainable profitability. Here you can see a list of our past activities. First, we have PRI. We have become a member of this world's largest group for responsible investment. And we started to ask the private sector to conduct ESG. And so we have actually created an ESG evaluation system for Korean equity. And we also work with the International Corporate Governance Network and the Asian Corporate Governance Association as members. Up until this time, we were mostly focused on governance, but we also expand our interest to the environment. And so we actually became a member of the Asia Investor Group on Climate Change in November of 2020. What was quite meaningful in May of 2021, we invest our limitation for investment, and so we have stopped investing in fossil fuels. Here you can see 4 activities that are conducted by the National Pension System. First, we have activities as shareholders, and ESG integration is something that I would like to focus on. So here you can see that in order to make investments based on ESG, we have to evaluate the ESG situation. So we have bi-yearly evaluations of Korean companies for about 1,000 Korean companies, and the evaluation result is then shared with the investment managers, and they actually consider this in considering the size of the investments that they make. So what are some of the indexes that are used for evaluations? Here you can see that we have evaluation indexes for ESG, and we've mostly focused on diversity of BOD in the past, but more recently we have added more elements related to climate, and for society we have focused on industrial safety as well as fair trade. And so the national pension system in the past focused mostly on governance in the past, but now we are more focused on climate change, environmental assessment, as well as industrial safety and fair trade. And we also focus on human resources as well as human rights. So you can see that we are diversifying our indexes for ESG evaluation. Let's take a look at our screening process. What we do is if there is mining of coal, we have a negative screening process. And so companies that mine coal or companies that generate electricity using coal will not receive any new investments. And if we have investments in place already, then we cannot withdraw the investments right away because it will impact the market. So we are coming up with plans to withdraw our investments by phases. And so we are coming up with procedures to make this possible. And so when we come up with a process, then we will follow these procedures to withdraw our investments. Here I would like to talk about another aspect, which is activities by the shareholders. These are topics that we discuss with the companies that we invest in. For example, dividends, compensation for the executives. And if the executives were to participate in illegal activities, how would the company respond? And when there are agendas like this on the agenda of BOD meetings, we would discuss these issues in depth. And this is all related to governance. But here you can see that in the future, we will also take a deep dive into topics such as industrial safety and climate change. And if there are issues related to these topics for companies that we invest in, we will continue our dialogue. So in the past, as I have continued to emphasize, we mostly focused on governance, but we are expanding our interest to the environment and society, in particular climate change and industrial safety. So thus far, I have shared with you what points are considered for ESG in making investments by the National Pension System. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your presentation. The National Pension Service makes long-term investments, and the purpose is for long-term stable profitability. Well, if we take a look at the success of ESG, I think it quite a bit pivots on assessment, and so thank you for taking that into consideration. Well, we would like to listen to the presentation for longer if time allowed.
And next, well, for the past couple of months, I have been visiting KB Finance Group once every month to give a lecture. I was impressed by how sincere the executives are and how serious they are when it comes to the relevant issues concerning ESG. And we have invited Managing Director Moon Hae-suk of the ESG division of the KB Financial Group to give a presentation on finance to change the world, the better world that KB aspires to create. Good morning. I am in charge of ESG at the KB Financial Group. I am Managing Director Moon Hae-suk. It is an honor to present at this important event. And today, I would like to share with you a presentation on finance that changes the world that KB aspires to create. So that is actually the mission of the KB Finance Group. We want to change the world through finance, and I would like to talk about what kind of activities we're carrying out in order to achieve this goal. Nowadays, we are experiencing natural disasters such as the typhoon and also heavy rainfall and floods. But we all know that because of climate change, we are suffering from greater natural disasters. And the greatest crisis that humanity is faced with is probably the climate crisis. This is probably not an exaggeration to say this. The environment and the society and also governance issues are now very important for all businesses, and this is changing the paradigm of industries. In the past, we resorted to fossil fuels for generating energy, but nowadays we think about how we can create clean energy. In the past, we depended on combustion engines for transportation, but nowadays we think about how we can improve our transportation means, for example, by implementing electric vehicles. And so the industrial paradigm is changing, and if we do not adjust, then we might not be able to survive, and businesses are aware of this. So then from the finance side, why does the finance sector talk about ESG? You might have asked this question before. We are also a company that needs the investment from the National Pension Service. But at the same time, we are an investor that invests in companies such as LG Corporation or Hyundai Motors. So we have to be very good in ESG, but at the same time, we have to be a facilitator and enabler that enables other businesses to be very good in terms of their ESG activities. So we play the role of a facilitator and supporter. And I think that within society, the role that we play in order to further expand ESG in our society might be more important. So the KB Finance Group is carrying out ESG management. And let me give you some specific examples of what we're doing. First of all, in 2020, we declared our ESG implementation principles. There are many different provisions under this declaration, but first of all, we want to provide responsible financial services for the environment and society. And through this, we want to promote the happiness of our customers and also create a better world. That is the first goal of our ESG implementation principles. And for this, we have two strategies. First of all, in order to go towards a carbon neutral society, KB Finance Group wants to play a role as a supporter and facilitator. We want to also provide the products and services for promoting sustainable finance. As we conduct our business at our branches, we use electricity, we operate vehicles, and we want to make sure that we are carbon neutral at our branches and the vehicles in terms of the vehicles that we use. So we have set a goal to become carbon neutral within the KB Finance Group by 2040. And also we have another goal to ensure that the people that we work with or the companies that we work with, for example, the companies that we invest in or provide lending services to, become carbon neutral by 2050. So we also do assessments every now and then. We have a sustainability report, which we also disclose to the public. In order to meet these goals, of course, Samsung Electronics entered into RE100 today. We are also a member of RE100, and so that is why we have set the goal to become carbon neutral by 2040. And also we have the policies in place to make more environment-friendly investments so that we can contribute to creating a green economy. Of course, we cannot do everything alone. We work with entities within and outside of Korea. Through close partnership, we work towards meeting our goals. The basics of ESG, we believe, is that respect and also cooperation. Those are the principles for the goals that we want to achieve. So now we want to pursue the interests of the various stakeholders, which would include the community, the SMEs, our partner companies, our customers, our executives, and employees. And our activities are being also publicly disclosed through our ESG management reports, which you can find through our official website. I talked about how KB is aspiring to create a better world. And the world that we want to create, along with you and all of the stakeholders, is to create a world where everyone can enjoy happiness and grow together and prosper together. For that, we focus on fostering the experts and also develop a system for care. For example, we need a better care system at the elementary schools and also the preschools, for example, and at the community level as well. We also work to create value, social value, by working with various businesses to open job exhibitions and employment exhibitions. And also we create funds so that we can provide financial support to businesses. And also we support startups through our incubation projects. We also want to create a sound society where there is diversity being promoted in the ecosystem. We have the KB project where we try to foster the bees, which will lead to further biodiversity, because greater number of bees will lead to greater flowers blooming, which will lead to greater influx of insects, which will lead to greater biodiversity. We also have projects to create more forests in Korea. And also, we dream of a world where there are activities carried out for preserving the environment. So we have our employees taking part in an internal campaign where there are volunteer work being carried out by our employees to preserve and protect the environment. We're a financial institution, and so we focus on also the finance side. We want to create a better environment through financing and financial services. So we have come up with environment-friendly green finance products, and also whenever a customer purchases such a green finance product, we have a matching fund where the money goes to environmental issues. So we further work on expanding on investment in green infrastructure development and the development of renewable energy. Last but not least, there is a saying that in order to go further, you have to go together. In order to create a world, a better world, then we have to walk together. We want to walk with you, and we want to do our best along with you, side by side. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, I think the organizers didn't give us enough time. We have so much to say, but so little time on our hands. We just heard from KB Finance Group, which is, like the MPS, also a very important entity within the finance sector of Korea. It's like the BlackRock of Korea. So going beyond investment and assessments, also the KB Finance Group is engaging in various different projects, including the KB project, which was very impressive. Let's go on to the next presentation.
We have with us Senior Vice President Park Jun-sung of LG Group, and he will speak to us under the title of Responsible Business, Sustainable Future. Good morning. As have been introduced, I am Park Jun-sung, in charge of ESG at LG Corporation. It is indeed a great honor for me to be invited at the DMZ Forum 2022. I would like to take this opportunity to talk to you about LG's efforts for ESG management and a sustainable future through my presentation. Before I begin, I would like to introduce LG as a company and its business philosophy. Founded 75 years ago, the LG Group is currently divided mainly into three affiliations: electronics, chemicals, and telecommunications and services. You can see that there are electronics, displays, and Innotech within electronics, and we have a holding company, LG Corporation. It's the first holding company in Korea, and it manages the group's portfolio in order to lead the global markets along with the mid to long-term strategies. We also have a principle called the LG Way. The LG Way incorporates all of the vision and behavioral modes for the people of LG. It is based on customer value creation, people-oriented management, and Cheongdo management. This will propel us to become the top company. And so you can see the LG Way centered around society and humanity, and it includes the way to respect the environment, which is aligned with the theme of today's forum. ESG is no longer a rhetoric, it is the standard for business management. And so under this de facto standard, LG is working to create adaptable strategies. Credit rating companies have jumped on the board to include ESG risks when assessing credit ratings. And we can see that they are definitely evaluating ESG-related risks. EU and other major nations have begun to not already set mandatory standards for companies to transparently disclose official environment and social policies, but you can see that already it's being a direct impact on operation and cost management. Taking these changes in society into consideration, in order to maintain our competitiveness, we need new strategies. We need to make sure that we not only strive financial performance, but also non-financial results. And in order to effectively resolve ESG issues, we need to make sure that we include the entire value chain working together in sync. In particular, due to climate change, we see that we are moving towards decarbonization, so we need to have aggressive R&D and even more aggressive investments in re-strategizing the current business models. Up until now, all of the activities for the social responsibility, we believe that there would be trade-off for corporations. But for LG, ESG management, we believe, does not impair our financial values at all, but rather it helps us achieve a balance for financial and non-financial performance. LG has given much thought to the change of our business environment, and based on our principles, as you can see on the slide, we have decided that our direction for ESG will be responsible business and sustainable future. Through ESG management, we will incorporate consumer value for all of our work to become a respected company to create value for everyone. Concerning the ESG direction of LG, we have been able to see that it is aligned with greater peace that is being strived by the DMZ Forum and the Gyeonggi Province. LG Corporation is the holding company for the 3 subsidiaries, and as you can see, we are working on fundamentally enhancing balanced performance for especially non-financial performance standards. And in the middle, we are working on creating an ecosystem for ESG. And on the right, you can see that we are looking to reshape our business reflecting climate action and ESG governance. You can see that this reflects the direction of the LG brand, and we wish to live up to the mission that has been given to us in these contemporary times. LG Electronics, Energy Solution, and Chemical also reflected the operational directions in forming core strategies that deal with the relative ESG issues. And according to the ESG direction, each company is also establishing their own strategies. In particular, in order to overcome the climate crisis, we have come up with a plan to overcome the climate crisis, also to manage the energy use, as well as come up with ways to contribute to decarbonization. As a first, for the major companies in Korea, we have announced decarbonization and net zero, and so we have come up with detailed plans to achieve net zero. For the renewable energy, 5 companies within LG have decided that they will be using only renewable energy. So, by 2050, we hope to reduce the use of energy by 40% by improving our processes, and also 50% by using renewable energy, and 9% through offset. That will be 100%. So net zero is the mission that we have for this era, and through various cooperation, we hope to contribute to not only net zero in Korea, but around the world. We have LG Energy Solution, which is the world's most competitive energy producer in the world. And so what we do is to continue to reuse and recycle the materials for batteries through the so-called closed loop system. This also includes the total value chain from the creation of production, use, and recycling. And so this actually is the responsible action taken for the battery industry by LG. By making sure that we become a creator of the sustainable future, we hope to create new business venture opportunities. First, we will have new eco-friendly plastics that is developed through 100% bioplastic. We will achieve a closed loop by recycling disposed plastics and batteries. We also wish to strengthen carbon reduction technologies based on renewable energies. Since we have the relevant technologies already under our belt, we believe that by making investments in this area, we can create a sustainable future for all. In order to facilitate the clean tech business, we have plans to invest 2 trillion won, and our major subsidiaries will have new venture startups with clean companies around the world so that we can have innovations in PLA plastic, battery recycling, among other technologies. So I have talked about climate change response as well as materials recycling, as well as investments for clean tech. This is an investment for our future, our common future. During the last 75 years, we have participated in Cheongdo management to become a responsible business. For a sustainable future for all, we will certainly incorporate customer values all the way throughout our value chain to become a beloved company and a company that joins hands with the nature and our people. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. Well, LG is already very well known through the philosophy of the past chairmen, and they have always been a respected company within Korea. And so we have high hopes for ESG, and we look forward to LG playing a leading role, and we can see through this presentation that they will indeed play a leading role.
And next, I would like to invite the head of Korea of the S&P Dow Jones Indices of S&P Global, Mr. Kim Bum-seok, and he will be talking about the ESG investment trends. Please greet him with a big hand. Good morning. I am the head of the Korea office of S&P Dow Jones. My name is Kim Bum-seok. As it was mentioned by Professor Choi and Governor Kim, well, we talked about communities and also groups. Well, I had a chance to hear about a hotel in India at a conference. And the story was told by a representative of a pension fund of a different country. This hotel from 2007 has been hiring people with disabilities, and the people with disabilities account for a certain percentage of the total employees. So about 16% of the total employees are people with disabilities. And this became well known around the world, and this attracted more tourists to the hotel, which had actually improved the revenue of the hotel. And this was an example given about how ESG management can help businesses and also the local communities. S&P within the S&P group carries out various different activities. And among the activities, we have the indices. There is a passive funds, the ETFs, for example. And we also utilize these indices to create financial products. When it comes to ESG, we also do ESG-related evaluations and assessments. We do scorings to develop various investment portfolios. If we look at the investment trends around the world, well, this was mentioned by the NSP as well, but PRI, an increasing number of institutional investors have been declaring that they will be members of the UN PRI. I understand that more than 3,000 UN PRI signatories have been recorded as of 2001. So these are signatories with over $100 trillion in associated AUM. So indeed, the ESG is a major investment trend. And this is a declaration of the commitment to participate in ESG management. But in practice, how are the financial institutions and companies engaging in ESG management? On the left side, you will find a graph which shows the global sustainable ETF assets growth by region. And if you look at the asset size starting from 2017 until 2021, last year, you can see that there has been very steep growth for the past couple of 2 or 3 years. And also, if you look at Asia, on the right side, you can see also Korea is included in here. Of course, if you look at the proportion of Asia against the global total, there is a limited proportion, but nevertheless, in Asia as well, this ETF asset growth is also being recognized and recorded. So this might be a difficult graph to comprehend, but the contents of this graph is that the CO2 emissions are being tackled. And this is actually an UN Environmental Program report, which looks at the emissions gap. So on the left side, you can see how much CO2 has to be decreased in order to reach our goal that we have set. And you can see here that a lot of efforts have to go into this goal, businesses included. And here you can see that among the S&P indices, we also have the climate-related indices. For example, the S&P Net Zero 2050 Paris-aligned and climate transition indices. Also, there are indices related to a very aggressive move to limit the temperature rise by 2 degrees Celsius by 2050. And a number of Korean companies are included here. So there's the physical risk. When the businesses engage in global activities, they will be faced with various climate issues. So based on past data, there are forecasts made on how these climate issues will have an impact on business activities. For example, not only the CO2 that has been generated through the business activities of the company directly, also the partner companies within the value chain of the company are looked into to identify the level of CO2 emissions. And this kind of analysis helps the businesses to build a roadmap towards meeting the 2050 goal for becoming carbon neutrality. And based on that, a portfolio is being managed for these indices. And here you will see our index. The businesses, they generate revenue, which leads to dividend payout. The shareholders, they find the dividends to be very attractive. Recently, there's a lot of volatility in the stock market, and so the dividends tied with these types of concepts, such as the ESG concept, it could really appeal to the consumers. So for the companies that have an ESG score, that is at the bottom of the list, are excluded from this index. And the concept here is to maintain the sustainability of dividend payout and also ensure that ESG management carries on. We also see here this pyramid structure here for the S&P DJI ESG scores. We have the data that we use, and we have questionnaires either completed by companies directly or on behalf of non-participating companies by a team of analysts using publicly available company disclosures. And so we manage our portfolio. If I had more time, then I would be able to explain our assessment methodology. However, we have already disclosed the relevant information, and if you request for such information, I can individually give out that info to you. But what's important here is that there has to be information made public, there has to be documentation, public documents, for example, and also the trends. All of the relevant info regarding these topics are disclosed on our website, so you might want to take a look at them by visiting our website. So as you know, we have the UN SDGs. There are 17 different goals which deals with a number of topics. For example, education is included here along with environment-related issues. And based on the SDG also, we can see that ESG management is being carried out, and we also take a look at those in terms of our indices as well. There was one company in India that had a plan to build a factory in a region where there was not enough water. There was backlash from the community members, and also there were regulatory issues as well. And so this business found it very difficult to build and operate the factory. But from an ESG perspective, the businesses that want to help improve and develop a certain region that has not been well developed in the past can actually find a new way to have positive impact by the implementation of ESG principles. And I think that is at the core of the ESG management that many companies are focusing on today. Thank you. Thank you very much. So ESG is no longer fringe investment strategy, but rather it has become mainstream. That seems to be the core of his message. And personally, the UN SDG, I think, is and cannot help but to serve as a standard for ESG. So thank you very much. And now let's hear from our panelists.
First, we will be inviting Ms. Lee Eun-young, who is the Deputy Director for the UN Global Compact Network Korea. Good morning. Could you put up the PowerPoint slides on the screen? I have actually been given 4 minutes. So many people have already mentioned this, but the UN Global Compact was created under Secretary General Kofi Annan on January 31st in 1999. It's an initiative to solve issues related to the private sector. It includes human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And this is in line with ESG that we're discussing today. And also to achieve the SDGs, we are working together with the private sector. I'm sure that you know that ESG is in the limelight. This is because that investors are focusing on ESG. BlackRock is a company that has announced that they will be evaluating their investment targets based on ESG, and it's already been 4 to 5 years ago since we have seen large investors such as BlackRock using these principles. And last year we have seen an ESG fund launched in Korea. We use the keyword ESG, and we're the first to actually use this keyword. But I think we have sustainable development as a fundamental principle under ESG. So we need to be profitable at the same time to become socially responsible. So we need to be socially sound and environmentally sound in order to have sustainability of the company, of the nation, and of the international community. And from 2000 to 2015, we had MDG, but from 2015 to 2030, we have the SDGs. And the SDGs, unlike the MDGs, include the participation of the private sector. And it also opens the participation and contribution of the private sector. Under the goal of leave no one behind, we are striving to achieve sustainability. And as you can see on the slide, many companies are being able to seize new opportunities in the market in that process. UN Global Compact continues to provide guidance for responsible companies, and we create international standards. And if you follow these international standards, then you are able to contribute to finding solutions within our society. And I believe that it is quite a virtuous cycle. So as I have already mentioned, in 2004, we used the keyword ESG for the first time, and at that time, we thought about how we're going to ask the companies to become responsible. And so that is why we introduced the concept ESG. So those are the three elements that we suggested. And ULPLI is an organization that was created. So we asked the National Pension Service to join PLI. And at that time, 15 years ago, there was a lot of resistance on the part of the investors, and they were not sure why they need to consider ESG. But ESG has already been mainstreamed in investment. That is quite amazing. And so whether it be financial results and regulatory trends, as well as the change in the mindset of the stakeholders, it's all leading to stronger ESG trends. We are here at the DMZ Forum, and so we need to mention biodiversity. KB and POSCO are some of the companies that are not only working on climate change, but also to strengthen biodiversity. And here you can see that TNFD actually has biodiversity targets and asks companies to issue biodiversity reports. So this is a framework to reduce the impact on biodiversity, and green taxonomy is an issue that is related to this because EU has come up with their taxonomy. And to take this a step further, Europe actually introduced social taxonomy as a concept. And so not only are they looking to respond to climate change, but they're also looking to the private sector to make sure that they become responsible for society as well. And ESG has become an important pillar for this. I'm actually pressed for time, and so this is the last point that I would like to make. This is a concept that was introduced by the UN, and this is something that I would like to introduce for the DMZ Forum. In 2015, during the tenure of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, we came up with a platform called Business for Peace. Of course, peace, security, all of these issues center around the government, but there is also a role for the private sector to play, and we believe that the private sector can make a great contribution for peace. And so when we launched the Business for Peace platform, we launched the Kaesong Industrial Complex. I also visited Kaesong myself. And what I remember is that there was a lady who worked for a Korean company at Kaesong, and she actually got married and had 2 children, and she had been working there for 10 years. So this North Korean lady who said that she was living off this company for 10 years and it was sustaining her family. And so I realized that that's the role that companies should be playing. And so there are some great cases. Nespresso works with Colombia, especially during their war. And after the war, restoration was something that Nespresso participated in. And Cisco also works in the borderline between Palestine and Israel to create jobs for war veterans. Coca-Cola works for the mediation of conflicts between India and Pakistan. And so we have seen that companies are actively participating in business for peace. And so I do believe that the DMZ can, in the future, play a large role for peace between the 2 Koreas and for the international society. And I do believe that it could become mainstreamed into biodiversity triggered by the UN, as well as make a contribution for the achievement of SDGs. In the end, accountability and sustainability are important cultures that we need to maintain before unification and after unification so that we can continue to create ESG values for all of our societies. At the UN, this is our slogan from 2010. So this is from 2020 to 2030, the decade of action. And I hope that you will also take part in this decade of action. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So in the end, what ESG strives to achieve is sustainable development and a better world for all. And so taking that into consideration, biodiversity and human rights can certainly be included in this topic.
Last but not least, I would like to invite our last panelist. Because of the Ukraine issue, business situations might be difficult because of the businesses being conducted in Russia, but he nevertheless has agreed to come here. He is Chairman Kim Soo-won of RH Focus. Please greet him with a big hand. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. As was introduced, I am the chairman and CEO, Kim Soo-won of the RH Focus Group. We're in the airline industry and the air freight industry. Now, during the keynote discussion, the two co-chairs mentioned something very important. They mentioned that many people envy how Korea succeeded in afforestation within a very short period of time. And indeed, the citizens of Korea and the government put in a lot of effort for afforestation. And indeed, this is a great achievement for us as Koreans. I think that the National Forest Service also played a role. And also, there is a team within the National Forest Service that operates air vehicles for tackling the forest fire. So I thank them for their efforts. ESG is a new trend, as it was mentioned before. In the past, the companies seem to focus on financial performance, but going to the future, the respect for humans and also the management for creating a better world will become important management principles that should be increasingly implemented by businesses. ESG management is no longer a matter of choice, but I believe it has now become essential for all businesses. And also, if we think about our society, there are many different relationships that we establish, and these relationships have to be respected. That is part of the ESG spirit and principle. When we think about the environmental side, of course, there's the Mother Earth. We have to revive the natural ecosystem and restore it. We as human beings live on this planet, and we have to create a better environment for ourselves and also the other living beings of the earth. And as it was mentioned, we're experiencing and we're seeing the situation in Ukraine. And as you know, the world is connected together. Unfortunately, the people of Ukraine are suffering greatly, and the fires and the natural disasters sometimes need the helicopters to stop the fires and to help with the restoration. Now, my company deals with such air vehicles, such as helicopters. We work with the government agencies, such as the fire stations and also the police and the National Forest Service, for example. So I have been working through these Korean government agencies to work with the relevant agencies in Ukraine so that we can be of service and help the people of Ukraine under these difficult circumstances. The ecosystem of the DMZ, as it was mentioned by the chairman, is not only a belonging of us, does not only belong to us, but it's a space for the global community. It is a space for peace. And also, I believe that we have to think out of the box. We have to move away from thinking that a certain issue is simply determined by being black or white, that there are only two sides of this. We have to have a diverse perspective and go towards the future with diversity in mind. On the Korean Peninsula, there is the DMZ, and as you know, surrounding the DMZ and throughout the Korean Peninsula, there are various geopolitical factors that involves the four major countries. We have to be able to respond to these geopolitical issues, and we have to take interest in the relevant issues when it comes to DMZ. We have to ensure that diversity is promoted within DMZ for the sustainable future of the DMZ. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. He also talked about the geopolitical risk that the DMZ is faced with. So, as a moderator, I have to be mindful of the time. We are to end by 12:13 so that we can take a commemorative photo and begin lunch at 12:20. So we have only about 27 to 28 minutes left. So rather than me taking up all the time, asking a lot of questions, I think it would be better for the 6 invited speakers to engage in a free discussion amongst themselves. If there's anything more that anyone would like to add, I would like to give the opportunity to them. So perhaps I can allocate about 4 minutes per person. So I don't want to take up the time. I just want to give 4 additional minutes to all of the speakers on stage. If you want to make a comment to another speaker, please go ahead. Or if you would like to add some more remarks, that's okay too. So why don't we start from the far left? And then go in that order, going to the right side of the stage. So I'll give you 4 minutes each.
Well, related to ESG, you may feel free to take off your mask when you speak. So related to ESG within S&P Global, the role that I play.
Well, there's the investment side, there's the evaluation assessment side. We assess ESG related matters and also credit as well. In my view, ESG, well, we talked about SRI or CSR, but ESG has become actually a very widespread concept. And many people started to speak about ESG within S&P as well. When we look at the services that we provide and the assessments that we carry out, we feel that we are looking into perhaps a very wide range of issues. And so these issues can only be accomplished through the efforts of a wide range of people. And of course, this has to be a top-down approach rather than a bottom-up approach. The MPS and also large corporations, agencies, and also ESG service companies, these related organizations have to work together. Not a single entity cannot do everything alone. So there has to be the policy in place, and also there has to be the intentional effort made when making investments in line with ESG principles, because it's very difficult for the general investor to make investments with ESG in mind. As it was mentioned before, there are many financial products out in the market, and if you look at the case of Japan, for example, the Central Bank of Japan and also the pension fund of Japan, they're very strong and very committed when it comes to providing products related to ESG principles. So I think that it has to be the supplier side that has to have the commitment and lay out more ESG related products. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. So now KB's Managing Director Moon, I would like to give you 4 minutes, but at the same time, I have a question for you. I'm curious about the KB project. Is it doing well? First of all, the KB project, the project involving the bees, since you asked. And there may be some people who became curious about this project because I mentioned it in the presentation. But yes, we successfully finished our first stage of the project. You might be curious whether this project can be successful because we're trying to grow and raise bees in the middle of a city. And I had actually visited Professor Choi to receive his advice when we were planning for this project. And at that time, Professor Choi, he told us that in the past, all of the different animals and insects lived together with humans. But from some time on, humans started to live alone and the animals lived apart from humans. And that's what led to the distinction or extinction of species. So actually bees, well, it's not something new that they coexist with humans. We're just going back to what had been in the past. But we're just trying to help people take interest in how our environment was or how our habitat was in the past. And luckily, a lot of corporations and local governments are taking interest in this project and asking or knocking on our doors. So I do hope that the small step that we have taken can further expand throughout Korea. Gyeonggi-do has a lot of different cities and localities within Gyeonggi-do. So if you're interested, please come to us. We would be happy to partner with you. And in terms of ESG, if I may add on a few words, in the morning, I had a chance to participate in a meeting of ESG companies. There is an energy crisis that has been driven by the Ukraine situation. And some people believe that that might hurt the ESG initiative. But nevertheless, the businesses, the companies, we still believe very firmly that ESG management is the way to go. However, it's the priority setting that is important. And we're contemplating over where we should place our priorities. For example, someone mentioned that we have to do this together. And also the ESG ecosystem is very important. For example, the financial institutions that are in charge of the financing and also the pension funds who play a very important role in the capital market and also the credit rating institutions. There are different entities within the financial sector of the ESG ecosystem. We all have to come together and cooperate so that we can ensure that this ecosystem remains sound and healthy so that we can really promote the transition of our society to become a place where more people can enjoy happiness and prosperity. So we need more support. We need more sharing of knowledge and information. We also need to, because there's a lot of needs and demand for information in terms of what's happening on the ESG side, I believe that this type of event is an excellent opportunity for us to share information about ESG management. And in particular, ESG is difficult sometimes for the SMEs to carry out, the small and medium-sized entities. So this type of event can be a very helpful event for the SMEs as well. So I thank Gyeonggi-do for hosting this event, and I do hope that more events like this can take place so that we can really share the news of ESG and share relevant information. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I'm sure that you are very familiar with this, but if the bees disappear from the earth, this will lead to devastating results, in particular in terms of the food shortage. And we are seeing how businesses are trying to solve that problem. So that's very impressive.
Next, we would like to invite Mr. Park Jun-sung of LG. Are there any additional remarks that you would like to make? And in particular, are there any activities that are being conducted with Gyeonggi Province? Well, first of all, yes, I think the microphone is working. Let me first answer your question, Professor. With Gyeonggi Province, we have a social contribution activity. It is, in fact, an ESG activity. LG Display is located in Gyeonggi Province, and we work on creating a forest in the Paju area. So we are actually planting about 600 young trees in a forest nearby our factory. We also work with reducing waste. So at LG Display, the executive and staff are working with Gyeonggi Province to reduce the waste. And we are also working on establishing green school zones within the community. So as you can see, LG is collaborating very actively with Gyeonggi Province for ESG activities. I am able to talk about ESG by LG in front of such a distinguished audience today, and that's very meaningful because ESG is not a rhetoric. I hope that this was an opportunity for all of us to listen to what the corporate sector is doing for ESG. I think it's very meaningful that I had this opportunity to introduce our activities. For companies, ESG is a matter of survival. It's actually a standard of becoming a sustainable company. So we have strategies, we have action plans. It's not easy to have all of this in place. In particular, if we are to reduce our carbon emissions, then we need our reduction technologies. We also need to have conversion of energy in our processes. And all of that calls for immense investments. And so what we need to do is to become as wise and effective as possible. So that would be the very important point for companies. At LG, we need to make sure that we exclude greenwashing. And we always want to make sure that we are practical in achieving ESG. And I am the control tower for ESG at the holding company, but each subsidiary has their own organization. Some people say maybe ESG will lose its shine in just a few years. But ESG actually was born in the 1980s and 90s when we first started to talk about responding to climate change. The name changes from CSR to ESG. Of course, the naming could change, but the trend will remain in the future. And so the corporate sector will also certainly work with this irreversible trend in the most wise way possible. We look forward to your support for companies and LG as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will then go to Mr. Lee Dong-sup of the National Pension Service. You talked about various evaluation indexes. I think it could confuse some companies. And so maybe you could elaborate on this topic? Well, we do use indexes, as I mentioned in my presentation. And these indexes are not indexes that we created alone, but rather we benchmarked about 300 indexes on the market, and we selected indexes that we believe is well aligned with financial results and also stock prices. And that is why we introduced the indexes through my presentation. From the corporate side, you may think, if we get high scores for these indexes, is that helpful for ESG management? You may think this and question this. At the core of this, if you receive good marks in these indexes, does it mean that companies are good at ESG? And if you are good at ESGs, will you be profitable? I think these are very important questions. So in the end, from an investor's perspective like ourselves, if we invest in companies with good ESG, will we be profitable in our investments? That really is a question that we have on our minds. ESG activities should not be done for ESG's sakes, but it should be for the fundamentals of the company, and it should be in the direction of making the company profitable. Or at the very least, it should be used to hedge the risks for companies. So you should not be doing ESG for ESG's sake, but it should be done for the fundamentals, the financial results, and also to mitigate risks. Second, sometimes you may actually sacrifice S for E or G for S, so some of the indexes may look contradictory. And so if you focus on the environment, then maybe you will be less profitable. Or if you try to increase employment, then it could lead to less profitability. And sometimes the S and the G contradict. And we have found in our research that there are issues of contradictory indexes. And so how are we going to deal with these contradictions? This is something that we have to discuss in depth with companies. And since we have the private sector represented here today, especially leaders in ESG, I would like to mention those two issues, whether it's related to the performance, whether it could mitigate risks, and how do we solve contradictory indexes. And so I hope that we will have further opportunities to discuss these issues. Thank you very much. Well, there are some companies that ask for my advice, and whenever I am asked for advice, I talk about my research as well. And there's one company that wishes to contribute to my research, and they ask, will helping you contribute to ESG? Excuse me? But I always say that evaluation indexes are not fixed. These indexes will evolve as well. And so from the corporate side, if they invest in researchers, you may think that it doesn't help ESG, but such research, if it is for biodiversity, up until now, it's not in the limelight on the part of the government. So many people invest in technology, but we don't invest in research for biodiversity. But when the government is not investing in biodiversity, if companies invest in biodiversity, do you think that these could be reflected in indexes later on? I think it could be considered, certainly. At the National Pension Service, we always have a long-term view, so we don't take a look at indexes that have short-term impacts. And if investments in researches that you have mentioned can mitigate risk or have long-term results, or if it could help certification, or if it could help the environment, in particular decarbonization, then we could reflect that in our indexes. So that is certainly possible. Thank you very much.
And next, it's time to listen from Chairman Kim Soo-won. Because of the Ukraine war, I know that you have been directly impacted and your business has been hurt. Do you have anything else to add? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your interest and support. At present, despite the difficulties, we are in the process of normalizing our business. So we are conducting our business activities and when it comes to ESG management, I think that the small steps are very important, the small actions that we take. In particular, I would like to emphasize the importance of following the safety rules. Of course, in particular, because we develop helicopters and also the parts for helicopters, it's very important for us to follow the manuals because it's directly related to safety. And as a result, if you look at the helicopters that are operated by government agencies, the Russian helicopters that we provide has the lowest rate of accidents because we emphasize the safety regulations. And likewise, I think that when it comes to ESG management, the small things make a difference. Yes, thank you very much. So as it was mentioned by Chairman Kim, when we try to achieve something, when we pursue something, we carry the relevant activities out. But then when there is a sudden crisis or there's an emergency situation, we tend to stop all of our efforts. For example, during the financial crisis, the different activities that were carried out for different goals were stopped and we just focused on the financial crisis. But I think that we have to really not lose our pace and carry on. And next, Deputy Director Lee.
Well, we should have actually asked you to have a full hour of presentation. I know you have much to say. I'm sorry we were not able to give you enough time, but you may add to your presentation at this present time. Thank you very much. Well, we have discussed ESG and we have ESG experts on the panel today. And so I think there are some companies that are already experiencing ESG fatigue. In the end, we need to make a sustainable society, sustainable companies, and a sustainable earth. And so what are the values that we stand by for this sustainability? A few years ago, I have been able to visit Daesongdong, which is an area that is restricted for civilians to enter, and I joined KT in their project there. In that area, the infrastructure is very old and there are physical limitations for the local community. So how can we peacefully support that local community? I witnessed what KT is doing for that community, and I thought that in order for us to take a step closer to unification, of course the role of the government is very important, but we also need to work through the private sector. All of the companies represented here today have great social contributions both home and abroad, and you are working to mainstream ESG into your company. But I think the more you collaborate, the more exchanges that we have, not only will we be able to work with the soft elements, but I think we will be able to have exchanges economically, which will certainly help us take a step closer to unification and also lessen the burden economically for future unification. I also worked with K-Water, and I am their ESG advisor for a long time. I think it was about 10 years ago when North Korea opened their dams and there was water flooding South Korea that actually killed one South Korean resident. And at that time, I suddenly realized that the two Koreas are connected. We always think that there is a physical barrier, but certainly nature is connected and waterways are connected. And so how are we going to solve these issues and engage in exchanges? And that actually was a turning point for me to give this another thought. I do hope that the DMZ Forum will be a platform for dialogue on these issues and also discuss how the private sector can contribute to these exchanges. I hope that we will be able to have great participation for this forum on that front. Thank you very much for this invitation. Thank you very much for your remarks.
We heard from our 6 speakers, and hearing what they're saying, I was able to lift up my courage, because as ESG becomes increasingly popular topic, I have been receiving more and more requests for giving lectures, and I wasn't sure whether I was the right person to give such lectures because I know I can talk about the environment, but the other S and G topics, I wasn't confident. So I always declined the invitation, saying that thank you for the invitation, but I'm not the right person. And starting from a couple of months ago, I did begin giving 1 or 2 lectures because I started studying the topic of ESG, and I was able to find that ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. So it's a triangular structure. And looking at most of the companies within Korea and also abroad, I could see that perhaps it's because the ESG management is in its initial stages, but the 3 different sectors of ESG are looked at separately. And as it was mentioned before, actually the E and the S and the G are intertwined together. And I also came to see that there is a core that really links the 3 together, and that is diversity. Governance means you have to diversify the ownership, the governance. It's not just the owner of the company that should voice his or her opinion in terms of managing the company, but the various stakeholders have to take part, and also there has to be diversity in terms of the executives of the companies. Korean companies have been focusing on CSR activities. For example, there were a lot of scholarships that were handed out. In some sense, you can say that that was part of the social diversity or cultural diversity enhancement efforts. And also when it comes to environmental side, we're trying to promote the biodiversity in the environment and enable the businesses to play a role in the promotion of such biodiversity. So if you think of the E, S, and G from a diversity perspective, which I think is a common factor that links the 3 together, I thought perhaps I can indeed give a lecture on the topic of ESG. Today, after listening to our 6 speakers, I became even more confident that we shouldn't think of ESG as 3 separate categories, but rather we should think of ESG as principles that we can apply with diversity at the foundation. We can apply this in terms of dealing with the DMZ. So with that kind of a perspective, I think we would be able to tackle the various challenges that we are faced with in society. When I was young, I lived within nature, and nature continues to diversify. But why is it that we try to reduce diversity as human beings? We try to make one voice within our society. And why is it that humans engage in that kind of activity? We have to think about how we can further diversify or promote diversification in our society. So with that, I would like to conclude this session. I would like to thank our 6 speakers for their contribution. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the moderator as well. Thank you very much for moderating the opening ceremony as well as the plenary session. Investments is considering ESG, and it was a great opportunity to see how ESG is being mainstreamed into investment and finance. So we have gone through the opening ceremony as well as the keynote presentations. Thank you very much for joining us both online and offline throughout the morning. This brings us to the end of the opening ceremony of DMZ Forum 2022, hosted by Gyeonggi Province and organized by the Gyeonggi Culture Foundation and KINTEX. We would like to ask you to participate in the commemorative photo. We are here to take a look at the bigger vision for greater peace. We will continue our forum today and tomorrow, please take a look at our website for the detailed agenda. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. For those of you who are on site,